welcome to Interesting Choices, the show where we take a look at TV, movies, video games, books, what have you, and take a good look at the interesting choices they make. I'm one of your hosts, Sky, and Kate had to step away to take care of some family business, so for the time being, joining me on the show today is my good friend, Caitlin. And today, we're talking about a blast from the kind of past. If you were a 90s kid, you probably remember. Gargoyles, Stone by Day, Warriors by Night. It was a very small niche of shows that weren't quite horror adjacent, but sort of horror tinged. Batman the Animated Adventures. Normally the show wouldn't quite fall under what we talk about for the podcast, but I mean, it's got a lot of the stuff that we look for. It's just a ridiculously stacked vocal cast, some really crazy plot turns that we'll probably mention. We're just going to be sticking to the first few episodes. So, Caitlin, did you have a lot of experience with Gargoyles growing up? Or?
I watched Gargoyles when I got the chance growing up. My main memory of it is that my parents didn't have the cable package to view Disney, so I would watch bits of it at friends' houses, or I would catch TV specials when it was on the channels that us muggles were able to have access to. So I had a sense of nostalgia for it, but not really a good memory of the series. And over the years, I've seen bits and pieces of it here and there. And in the last few years, I watched it from start to finish. I believe I was recovering from having my wisdom teeth removed. So it was just a sit in bed, watch everything on my laptop, and then wonder how exactly this was aired during the 90s and designed and geared towards children.
Yeah, this is, I don't want to say a much more mature bent, but it definitely feels like a more mature show than Batman did at the time.
Rewatching the first couple episodes recently, it was hard to pin down who exactly the intended audience was. It felt very much like they wanted to tell a certain story, and the only way they were going to do it is if they stuck to Disney's primetime shows for children for selling toys. So I'm curious what I don't know if I want to say reboot because I have mixed feelings about reboots, but I am curious what a reboot today would look like and what it would feature, or if this were a brand new show coming out now, how exactly it would be handled and how it would be marketed.
It almost feels like something that would have come out now. I was in much the same boat as you growing up. For the most part, I just saw the toys, but I never really got to see the show outside of the premiere movie and then a couple bits and pieces here and there over the years. It's something that I have nostalgia for that I haven't really experienced. It wasn't a huge part of my childhood. I get the feeling that the show was just something the writers wanted to see. This is something they felt was missing from the landscape of TV, and they wanted to tell that story. Like when the mage casts his spell and he says the words, "Remain stone until the castle raises above the clouds," and then it turns out that happens because it's on top of a skyscraper. I can almost hear the writer patting himself on the back for that.
I can see my D&D group definitely congratulating ourselves on figuring that out.
But yeah, it starts out in ancient Scotland, 1,000 years before 1993. Vikings are attacking. There's betrayal. There's magic. We sort of get a sense of who all of the gargoyles are briefly, and that it's further cemented when they get revived later. It's a pretty standard story. There are a lot of little weird things. After the tragedy happens, after the betrayal happens, and Goliath asks them to turn him to stone so he can be with his friends and tells them to take care of gargoyles that are about to hatch, it's just dropped completely.
Yeah, I had so many questions about that. Perhaps from a parenting perspective, like what is this choice you are making? I I enjoyed the first couple episodes that I watched, but I kept getting hung up on the the naturalist perspective or the ecological perspective. And I know that it's a children's show. It was a
Hmm.
children's show in the 90s that was meant to sell toys. I should not be thinking about this as hard as I am, but I keep coming back to that, which I think a lot of us do when we are adults and rewatching things that we are nostalgic about, but now with a critical lens and with some years of experience behind us.
This show does make a couple missteps like that. I'm willing to forgive it just because of how fun it is. The very first episode starts out no fanfare, no title. A second episode, that title theme hits, and it is bringing it.
Yeah, the intro song and opening, it's not messing around.
It's very, I guess it's fine to say superhero themed. It's kind of a superhero show. That was the lens that they wanted to give this, but they also wanted to give it I think some kind of like the real world has magic in it. They wanted to position the gargoyles as the tip of the iceberg for all of the magic in the rest of the seasons of the show. And I feel like the theme song really brings that out. It's sort of dark, but also triumphant, I want to say.
I would agree with that, yeah.
The main, God, how many is it? There's Goliath. We learn that gargoyles don't call each other by names. Sometimes humans will name them like Goliath. Eventually they do get names because you need to put something on the box of the action figure, but we don't really get like a clear picture of how long-lived they are. Goliath is not surprised to see his one and only lady has made it 1,000 years into the future somehow. Like, he's happy to see her, but he's not like, how did you not die of old age?
Exactly, yeah. So I assume that as long as the stone lasts, they continue on. Again, going back to that ecological naturalist, how do they fit into the ecosystem? I do like that the Magus in the first episodes calls the gargoyles unnatural
Yeah.
creatures, which is rich coming from him as an albino wizard. Just a wee bit of prejudice, pot calling the kettle black in that time period, I would guess.
Especially when, from the sound of it, the gargoyles were there and then humans showed up and built a castle. And there's been like an uneasy truce since then.
It does feel like with new home developments, and then you get angry that bears keep getting into your garbage can, but the bears have been there for a very long time. It does feel like urban sprawl. So humans are taking over their natural habitat, and the gargoyles are getting into things. So I have this mental image of like chasing them off with brooms or something like that.
Yeah. I could definitely see Bronx like getting into
Yeah.
trash cans and stuff. The dog oil.
I have so many questions about that. So they mention that they're cliff dwelling. Okay, so they're like pigeons, but the dog doesn't have any wings. Does it climb like a mountain goat? How does this work? Why am I overthinking this?
I guess they really felt like they needed an animal companion, but like, were they just going to have like a golden retriever follow these things around? I mean, I assume it climbs stone the same way Goliath is, but just jamming his claws into it. But I don't know what the logic was behind that design choice. But the thing that really weirded me about Bronx, the dog gargoyle, is that his head is very similar to other humanoid gargoyle heads,
No,
which would
no,
be
no, no.
like if a dog had a people face.
No.
Yeah, there's Vikings, one of them voiced by the inimitable Clancy Brown, who has been mentioned on the show before. I mean, I might as well just talk about the voice cast right now because, like, holy god. We got Clancy Brown, which I just mentioned. Frank Welker does Bronx and pretty much all of the animals. Jonathan Frakes, Commander Riker, is David Xanatos. Then you have,
Marina Sirtis.
as Demona, Keith David as Goliath, who just has a voice like spun gold. Like, I could see him reading children's literature or growling that the hostages must be let go immediately. Like, he has the perfect voice for anything, and he puts it to really good use.
Any and every occasion.
And the writers, I feel like you wrote down some choice lines of his, but they had his voice in mind when they wrote those, because I could not imagine that coming out of any other person.
Exactly. It would not be the same show with anyone else. Yeah, if you tell me, do you want to watch this show? It has Keith David in it. I will cancel my plans for the evening and watch it. Same thing with Clancy Brown. Do you want to watch this? It has Clancy Brown. You know what? I'm clearing my calendar after work. If you tell me that the two of them are in the same show together and that the cast of Star Trek Next Generation apparently needed a hobby after they completed the series, and it's like a Star Trek reunion, I'm taking the week off of work. I am using my vacation days, and I'm going to watch it.
And then the biggest surprise to me, there were two. There was Bill Fagerback as Broadway, which I didn't get until rewatching it. Was supposed to be a fat joke, because Broadway, because he's wide. But you might know him as the voice of Patrick Star from SpongeBob. And then the biggest surprise was Ed Asner as Hudson, just really grounding everyone as the old mentor gargoyle, the only one that uses a weapon and also the only one with actual pants, doing just a really wonderful Scottish accent. Aside from him, most of the human characters, like Clancy Brown doesn't even try to do a Viking accent. He's one of the Viking invaders, which thank God, but like some of the Scottish accents that were on screen were physically painful for me to listen to.
Yes.
But yeah, so like we said, there's Vikings. The captain of the guard betrays them because reasons. The gargoyles are frozen in stone for 1,000 years. David Xanatos, the Elon Musk of this world, decides to London Bridge style, brick by brick, have the castle dismantled, flown to America, and built back up atop of a skyscraper, and that breaks the spell. And then the gargoyles have to adjust to the new city and help him retrieve some discs, but oh no, he betrayed them too. It kind of goes from there. Like, they're brought into this new world and they're again betrayed, and it sort of sets the tone for the rest of the series. And as far as Demona, she comes back. We don't find out why until like later in the series. It turns out she made a mystical suicide immortality pact with Macbeth. If you want to know, just watch the show. I read it a couple times and it still doesn't quite make sense. Her view is humans can't be trusted. They need to be eradicated. Goliath is the we must live in peace with the humans viewpoint. So they're really the Professor X and the Magneto of the piece.
Yeah, I'm wondering what we should touch on next.
I got a few odd points, like when they're dismantling the castle, they have guys with exosuits, which is just a really out there choice. They could have just had like forklifts and stuff, but no, exosuits. And then for some reason there's just a guy with like a big laser and he's just shooting it at the wall, and you don't know what it's doing. Like it doesn't show the process of what's going on. It just shows him briefly shooting a laser at a wall, and then it cuts, to more sensible types of construction.
The thought did occur to me during the disassembly and then reassembly of the castle is that Xanatos doesn't need to pay professionals for this, because that's going to be a very costly undertaking. He just needs to partner with some universities and then have the history students and the archaeology students and the architecture students get college credit in exchange for doing it for free. And it just, everyone benefits, I think, out of that arrangement. Definitely saves him a lot of money and gets some students some very unique hands-on experience. I say working in higher education while also questioning some of higher education's choices.
But yeah, they come back. They just sort of happen into detective
Elisa Maza.
She's the new love interest for Goliath.
I do like early in the episodes, it doesn't explain why Elisa never seems to sleep. And if I'm remembering correctly, from when I watched the entire series all the way through, she's on night shift a lot of the time, which would make a lot more sense than her just never needing to sleep.
Yeah, every time she shows up in the show, it seemed like she was getting in from the day shift. And then they hang out pretty much until dawn. But yeah, she's just sort of back-to-back adventures for I think 4 of the episodes take place over the space of a day. Or each one takes a day, so to speak, of nighttime. I'm getting confused.
And as far as we know, she doesn't sleep during any of that time.
Yeah, she's just awake all the time.
Which, again, might be asking a bit much of a children's show, but we have questions.
Mm-hmm. I want to briefly touch on Xanatos' building, which we only see the very bottom of and the very top of. We don't get a full ground to roof view of it, but the top, I'm gonna go ahead and say a third is this really cool building within a building design. There's a large glass atrium that makes up one curved side, and there's a building structure inside of that, and then the castle's on the very top of the building. And I don't know why, but for some reason I remembered it just being a regular old skyscraper and not this Blade Runner-esque imagination creation.
He's too obscenely wealthy for a standard skyscraper.
Yeah, he liked the skyscrapers so much that he asked them to put a skyscraper in his skyscraper. So he fakes an attack on himself to trick the gargoyles into stealing data he needs to make robot gargoyles, which I feel like he could have just hired mercenaries for that, but whatever. It's a kid's show. You have to learn not to just trust people. But during the first attack, he just pulls a laser gun out of the wall and starts shooting up the place. And then as they're leaving, one guy just throws a ninja star, and then they leave on the helicopter. And I really get the feeling that guy bought that and has been sitting on it for years waiting for an opportunity to use it.
He finally had his moment.
You go, ninja star guy.
And with this show, there are so many explosions and so many guns and so many lasers. And I was just imagining, as I was watching it, the animation team, having to massage their wrists and stretch some more and go, oh no, we have to do some more explosions. Everybody, it's going to be a long, long week. Get your wrist braces out.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. I certainly don't remember there being as many real guns, quote-unquote real cartoon guns, as there were in the show. They're all sort of real designs, but they're kind of just different enough to not look like a real gun, but they use gun sound effects in a way that pop culture kind of drifted away from after, Columbine and all that stuff happened.
There are certain things about this show, I don't want to say didn't age well, but it has aged differently compared to where, I guess, children's animation or preteen or teen animation has gone in more recent years. At the time, it wasn't something of note how many firearms are present in the show. And then rewatching it, having just spent this last pandemic quarantine doing nothing but watching cartoons, I realized, oh, there are a lot of guns in this show. I don't remember that. It's very interesting seeing how trends have changed.
Yeah, one thing I do want to give the show credit for is I was really worried that it's based in New York, that they were going to make some stereotype jokes. One of the gargoyles tries to hail a taxi and the guy just speeds away, so that was kind of avoiding that. But then they kind of drop the ball at the very end when Broadway makes a joke about Chinese food and being hungry an hour later. It's you were so close. You were so close.
Yeah, we made it 5-6 episodes in until they did that.
Mm-hmm.
All things considered, it definitely touches on things like not just tolerance, but also acceptance and needing to communicate to build relationships. in between there being laser guns and Xanatos having his Xanatos gambits going on.
It does seem like sometimes they do stuff just for cartoon logic. There's a part where Elisa is being chased through Central Park, and she takes refuge in a boathouse, and it very clearly shows that the boats that are docked in there are rowboats. But she's sitting next to what has to be her own body weight in gasoline. Maybe it's also a groundskeeping shed, but it was pretty much just there to increase the explosion count.
Yeah, it did seem like someone was not following safety protocol.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about episode 6, which is as far as I got in my rewatch for our discussion. But the characters for the pack, realizing that it's making fun of 90s cartoons within a 90s cartoon.
Right.
While also knowing full well that if the pack were a real show in the 90s, it would have been a hit and it would have sold millions of toys. Just thinking back on how bad our taste was.
Yeah, they are very professionally designed. And it's really weird because, like, it doesn't give you a clear idea of what that show's about. Every time you see it on the TV in the show, they're just running down a hallway, and sometimes they stop to punch a ninja or shoot a ninja or whatever. It's just them running down a hallway, and then the announcer says stuff. So this is presumably live action within that cartoon universe. But they've given people, like, real actual claw gauntlets and throwing hatchets and what have you. But yeah, that episode is very much written for kids. The beginning movie it's not bad. There are parts where you get that this is shows trying to communicate with children, but by and large, it's well written, it's well directed, there's good music, there's good animation. But in the pack episode, it's really just like, this is a very special episode of, you know, it's got the very clear, we should be friends with these guys moment. Uh-oh, they're up to no good moment. And here's the betrayal, we shouldn't trust anyone, except sometimes when we do moments. Like, they're very, very broadly presented in the show.
Yeah, and the remember kids, TV isn't real lesson.
Yeah. Like, it turns out it's all a ploy by Xanatos to get more data on the Gargoyles, I guess. But, like, in order to lure them into going to meet the pack, he sort of just rigs the cable TV and the ancient castle to just show that one TV show for a while. And it's funny watching these characters and be like, that's not how a TV is supposed to work. When you change the channel, there should at least, I don't know, be commercials on it or something. Like, it's not always going to be the same thing on every channel, but they don't know that they're Gargoyles.
I'm also thinking that, you know, that's not that different from Fox News and all of its variations. You're consuming essentially the same media no matter what channel you turn to.
No, it's just kind of funny how that would not have worked with, like, a person, or if Elisa had been, like, there at any time. It's like, that's not working right. Something's wrong with the TV.
Yes. Your TV's broken. Let's call the cable guy. I will point out that during my quarantine time of children's cartoons, there are quite a few Gargoyles references in the new DuckTales series finale, which was very delightful and was actually what inspired me to suggest that we rewatch the show for discussion.
I've heard that. I haven't had a chance to see it for myself. I should probably just touch on the main characters real quick. We talked about Goliath, talked about Eliza. Then there's also Bronx, who we've also touched on. But then there's the nerd, Lexington, and the cool one, Brooklyn.
I am very curious about a few things when it comes to children's shows and social dynamics and these shorthands we use for characters. So it's like there's the hungry one / funny one, there's the cool one, and there's the smart one. And it's over and over again. And the smart one is always tiny and always green. And I may have watched the entire new Voltron on Netflix multiple times in the last few years, so it's also on the forefront of my mind. Why are they always tiny, and why are they always green?
I don't know, and they kind of break that pattern with this because Broadway, the fat guy isn't orange, and the fat guy's usually orange.
That's true.
Pretty much every series has a husky orange guy, and I feel like at least some shows kind of buck that trend, but for different reasons. Like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Donatello's the smart one, but his bandana's purple. I think they only did that because, you know, he's green as a turtle, so they couldn't really give him the green bandana. Otherwise, it would just look like he had a piece of his own flesh wrapped around his face.
Oh, no thank you. That's an entirely different type of show there.
But they do kind of have... He's not the big guy, but Michelangelo is the orange one, and he is the one who is constantly suggesting that they eat pizza. So, like, that pattern sort of has a continuation there. Mm-hmm. I do like that there are basically two dads in this group. You've got Goliath, who's the serious, no-nonsense dad, and then you've got Ed Asner as Hudson as the grandpa dad. And he is, like, they kind of really lean into that he's the older one, because one of the first things he does when he wakes up in the future is plops down in an easy chair and turns on the TV.
Yes.
And I cannot praise Ed Asner's performance in this enough. Like, I kept forgetting that this was Cosgrove from Freakazoid, or the boss from Mary Tyler Moore. Like, he just really lives in that performance, and it's kind of delightful, honestly.
I would say that for people who are on the fence about, well, I don't know if I want to rewatch something from my childhood, just watching it for the voices and having a fun time knowing that the voice actors seem to be having a great time as well. It's really enjoyable just for that.
Yeah. And we won't get super into it, but this show does get kind of crazy. Not bad crazy, just crazy later on. You find out that Owen, Xanatos' twink boyfriend, turns out to be Puck, the Fae, from A Midsummer's Night Dream. And apparently in the past, Xanatos was offered immortality or a lifetime of servitude from Puck in his human form of Owen. And he picked the lifetime thing because he figured he would get immortality another way. And, like, that's his whole thing. He ends up marrying Fox from the Pack. And then that's a whole scheme to put together an amulet called the Phoenix Amulet. And it can travel through time, and there's a bunch of time shenanigans. Goliath has a daughter. It turns out that the eggs from the rookery were whisked away by the princess of the castle and the Magus, and they took them to King Arthur's mythical island of Avalon, where a bunch of other mythical creatures live. Xanatos also creates, like, a race of genetically engineered gargoyles that just sort of live in the sewers at a certain point. Like, there's a lot going on. And as part of the betrayal in one of the first episodes, the Vikings smash the gargoyle statues. Later, Xanatos figures he'll just super glue them together and try to unstone them. And you get, like, a half cyborg gargoyle called Cold Steel, I believe was voiced by Michael Dorn. Okay, no.
What?
Cold Steel was voiced by Xander Berkeley. Cold Steel was split into his component gargoyles, Cold Stone and Cold Fire. They were voiced by Michael Dorn and CCH Pounder, respectively. So, yeah, we got another Next Generation alumni there.
Okay. I need to go back and watch this entire show all over again because Michael Dorn played my TV dad. So I need to go enjoy this.
I just now saw Kate Mulgrew. Captain Catherine Janeway herself plays Titania, the Queen of the Fae.
I love the idea that this is just a Star Trek reunion. Everyone getting together.
So I'm reading through all the other ancillary voices. There's David Warner as the Archmage. You've got Cree Summer, massively prolific voice actress in her own right. Brent Spiner. Data plays the Fae form of Puck. Yeah, so one of the Pack. Dingo, the Australian one. That's his shtick in the Pack. He has a mohawk, like all Australian characters do.
Yes, of course.
Voiced by Jim Cummings, who you and everyone listening might know as Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, that's right.
Gosh, they just got everyone to do this.
I feel like 90% of our thoughts and our feedback on this show is about the voice actors and the delight in recognizing a voice and then discovering who it is.
Yeah, I'm still going down the list. Avery Brooks, Commander Sisko from Deep Space Nine, plays the character named Nakar. LeVar Burton plays Anansi, the African spider spirit. Cole Meany, Miles O'Brien himself. And of course, Rob Paulson, another titan of the voice acting world. Man, I could just list off. Oh my. So I'm flipping through the voice cast Wikipedia list, just admiring all of the names. And there's a whole section on that page devoted to all of the actors who were also in Star Trek.
Good.
It's its own section. So apparently I missed Nichelle Nichols. Patrick Stewart was considered for a role in the series, but his agency turned the offer down because they weren't going to pay him enough to be in it. And I feel like if that had been brought to him personally, I feel like he would have said yes to it.
Yeah, I feel like he would have taken that opportunity. Or like I mentioned earlier about reboots, I don't see him turning that down now.
I saw mention of like a possible spin-off they were going to do, like taking place in the future, Gargoyles 2130 or something. Don't remember seeing anything about that ever. I wish I could find more about that because that sounds like a neat idea.
I would definitely watch something new related to it. I would hope that it's a lot of Star Trek voice actors again. Just for my own personal enjoyment, obviously. But I could definitely see a new show or a spinoff being a hit.
Yeah, I feel like if this got pitched today, there's a chance it could be live action, and I'm kind of against that. I feel like the show's aesthetic was pretty broad and simple, but very iconic. If you've seen a Gargoyles character and you saw another character that was from that universe, you would know, you'd be able to match up the styles. But like they would have to add so much detail onto these characters to bring them into live action. It would just
it would weigh it down.
The Gargoyles seem to have the natural ability to just make their eyes glow at will. I wish I could do that. But yeah, Gargoyles, cartoon from the 90s, the nostalgia bomb. If you enjoy it, it's on Disney+. If you've never heard of it, it's worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of Star Trek. If nothing else, you'll have fun trying to spot the voices from everyone involved. It's really fun hearing Jonathan Frakes play a bad guy.
It is, yes. And you can never go wrong with the buttery smoothness of Keith David's voice.
Yeah. Like, if for nothing else, it's worth listening to Keith David, because he's one of those actors who just goes for it. Like, he does not half-ass any of his roles. And you can hear it in this. Like, he will say these lines, and your brain will process them as, like, okay, that was from a kid's show that's kind of goofy. But it works just because Keith David is giving it 110%.
Keith David is very, very good at selling this show. Never mind that it is like a Saturday morning cartoon for kids meant to sell Disney toys. He's committed.
He's just a joy to listen to or watch in any of his roles. And I don't know if anyone else could have pulled off Goliath as well as he does, if at all.
Well, I mean, it did get canceled for not having good enough ratings for Disney, but I don't think it would have had the same weight to it, and we probably wouldn't be talking about it right now if anyone else had been in that role.
Definitely a big part of just the realization of that character and the embodiment of that character in a voice. And I don't want to say he carries the show. A lot of the other characters bring something, but he is the bulk of the character for that show. I feel like it's fair to say.
I feel like I could talk more in depth if I had watched the entire first season or had dove into the second season as well, which gets bonkers from what I remember. And I remember one episode where Elisa thinks that she's always been a gargoyle and the gargoyles were always human, and it was very weird. But I did just have my wisdom teeth removed, so I may not have been all there as I watched it.
Aliens, apparently, too. That's who Nakar, Avery Brooks' character, was apparently an alien.
It's definitely a show that had a larger-than-life mythology and had very, very big plans for what it wanted to do and the stories it wanted to tell. And the voice actors had a blast doing it.
It wasn't afraid to tackle tougher stuff. There apparently is an episode where Elisa was shot. I think I remember some of that.
I vaguely remember that as well. So either we are both making up an episode from our memories, or they did tackle some bigger issues.
And then it just goes completely insane by the second season.
I did have the thought that I should update my cell phone alarm clock in the morning to Keith David as Goliath screaming, and I think that will finally get me out of bed on time. Maybe.
Is he just screaming to scream, or is he screaming one of his good lines?
He does scream a lot of really good lines. My mental image of it is there's lightning flashing in the background, so I think it was an emotional scream, but it is very, very loud, very jarring, very buttery. But also would probably wake me up from a dead sleep in a panic going, oh no, what's going on? I think I can briefly touch on some of the lines from the show. Some of the episodes and some of the plot, there are just some really, really good lines, like just one-offs from characters in this show. And some of the things, it feels like the writers had an idea and they're like, we want Keith David to say this thing. Now we have to write an entire episode around it. But it just works.
It's really a singular performance. This is probably the 100th time we've said it, but he's really good.
You tuned in for Gargoyles. Joke's on you. This is the Keith David fan club.
Yes, welcome to the Keith David Appreciation Hour, where we talk about how awesome Keith David is for an hour.
Only an hour.
If you want to find me on the internet, you can do so by going under Twitter. I'm at Shard_Corso. That's SHARD_CORSO. If you want to listen to our backlog of episodes, you can do so by looking the show up on Spreaker at Spreaker.com/shows/interesting choices, or just search for Interesting Choices on the podcatcher of your choice. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/interesting choices. And if you have a suggestion for the show, you can drop it at our Twitter, INTRESTINGCHOI6. That's Interesting Choice 6.
I just want to thank Caitlin for joining us and guest hosting today.
But as always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.